Hello everyone, and welcome. In this video, we'll be diving into the world of Power BI, focusing specifically on one of the most important concepts, Power BI deployment. This session is brought to you by ZoomInData, your space for learning business intelligence and data analytics. So, let's get started and understand how Power BI connects to different data sources and why this process is so essential in today's data-driven world. First question: how do deployment pipelines handle dataset parameter changes between dev, test, and prod? Power BI deployment pipelines allow you to configure rules for parameters, meaning each stage, dev, test, prod, can maintain different values such as server names, database names, or API endpoints. During deployment, only the structure of the semantic model is pushed forward. Environment-specific parameter values are preserved and not overwritten. Parameter rules ensure that updates from dev do not overwrite production parameters, preventing accidental connection to wrong data sources. These rules help maintain stable refreshes in test or prod even when developers use sample or lightweight data sources in dev. Second question: what happens if a report in dev references a dataset that does not exist in test during deployment? The deployment pipeline validates dependencies before deployment. If the reference dataset is missing in test, the deployment will fail. Power BI highlights the dependency conflict and alerts the developer to deploy the semantic model first or fix dataset linkage. The report will not be deployed because dependency integrity is a mandatory requirement in pipelines. The user may need to either deploy the dataset manually or map the report to an existing dataset available in test. Third question: how do you ensure semantic model version consistency across all stages of a deployment pipeline? Use the deployment pipeline's built-in comparison tool, which visually highlights differences in datasets, tables, measures, and relationships. Always deploy from dev right-pointing arrow test right-pointing arrow prod in sequence to ensure newer versions do not accidentally overwrite stable models. Enable version control via PBIP projects or Git integration to track semantic model changes outside Power BI service. Avoid editing datasets directly in test, prod to prevent version mismatch. Enforce a governance policy where only dev is used for modifications. Fourth question: what are the limitations of deployment pipelines when using shared or certified datasets? Shared or certified datasets cannot be fully duplicated across environments, meaning pipeline deployments may skip certain lineage connections. A report linked to a certified dataset will remain connected to the original dataset even if the pipeline deploys it to test or prod. Pipelines cannot modify sensitivity labels or certification status, so governance rules must be managed separately by data stewards. Shared datasets may create cross-environment dependencies, reducing isolation between dev, test, and prod and complicating validation. Fifth question: explain how incremental refresh behaves when deploying across environments. When a dataset with incremental refresh is deployed to test or prod for the first time, Power BI performs a full historical load, which may take time. Refresh policy definitions, example range, archive period, are deployed, but actual data partitions are not copied and must be rebuilt in each environment. Subsequent deployments do not overwrite existing partitions unless the structure of the refresh policy changes. Premium capacity optimizes incremental refresh partitions, but large data loads must be planned during non-peak times across all stages. Sixth question. How do you manage environment-specific connections, SQL, or SharePoint or API, during pipeline deployment? Use deployment rules to assign different connection strings or data source values for dev, test, and prod environments. Keep connection configurations stored as parameters so they can be overridden easily without modifying the semantic model. Use service principals and environment-based Azure AD groups to control authentication for each stage. Maintain connection governance documentation so developers know which environment each parameter applies to. Seventh question. How do you manually roll back a deployment if a pipeline update breaks production? Restore the previous working version by redeploying the last stable content from the test stage back to prod. If version control is enabled using PBIP or Git, download and publish an earlier version of the semantic model or report. Maintain copies or backups of prod datasets and reports so you can quickly republish them in case of unintended changes. Freeze the pipeline temporarily and conduct issue analysis to prevent any additional deployments until the problem is resolved. Eighth question. How do you implement Git-based version control for Power BI using Power BI Project, PBIP? Power BI Project, PBIP, stores reports, datasets, and metadata as decomposed folders and JSON files, which allows Git to track changes at a granular, file level instead of storing a single binary PBIX file. Developers commit and push changes to a Git repository, enabling traceability, controlled collaboration, and rollback to previous versions with standard Git commands. Branching strategies, example feature branches to dev to main, help isolate changes and ensure that only tested versions are merged and deployed. The changes in PBIP can be automatically deployed to Power BI service through Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions, enabling true C or CD for Power BI assets. Ninth question. What challenges occur when multiple developers work on the same report simultaneously, and how do you resolve conflicts? Since PBIX is not merge-friendly, simultaneous editing creates overwrite conflicts, leading to lost changes if version control is not properly implemented. Using PBIP format solves many issues, but JSON merge conflicts can still occur when multiple developers edit the same visual or dataset schema. Clear branching strategies and assigning ownership, one developer per tab or dataset, significantly reduce conflict frequency. Regular code reviews and pull requests ensure controlled merging, allowing teams to validate and resolve conflicts before changes enter the main branch. 10th question. How do you structure workspaces in a large organization to support dev or test or prod segregation? A standard structure is to maintain 3 dedicated workspaces, one for development, one for testing or UAT, and one for production, ensuring each stage has controlled access. Deployment pipelines are attached to these workspaces to automate promotion of reports and datasets while maintaining version integrity. Developers have full access only to dev, testers access only test, and end users access only prod, ensuring strict environment separation. Shared or certified datasets are placed in an additional centralized data workspace, which feeds semantic models to all environments without duplication. 11th question. What is the recommended governance model for personal workspaces in enterprise environments? Personal workspaces should have limited permissions, typically used only for exploration and private prototypes, not for production reporting. Administrators often disable sharing and publishing from personal workspaces to avoid data leakage or ungoverned report distribution. Production content must be moved from personal workspaces to governed team workspaces with proper RLS, access controls, and refresh policies. Periodic audits and powerbi admin reports help identify unused content and ensure employees do not use personal workspaces as storage for enterprise data. 12th question. How do you detect and manage workspace clutter? The Power BI admin portal and usage metrics reports provide visibility into report views, dataset refresh patterns, and stale content that has not been accessed for long periods. Workspace inventory audits help identify duplicate datasets, outdated semantic models, and multiple versions of the same report kept by different teams. Governance teams often implement naming conventions, tagging systems, and periodic cleanup policies to ensure a structured workspace environment. Automated checks using admin APIs can flag unused assets, enabling large organizations to clean workspaces without manual inspection. 13th question. How does deployment differ when using a single workspace versus multiple workspaces per environment? Using a single workspace mixes dev or test or prod content, increasing the risk of accidental overwrites, inconsistent versions, and unauthorized access to pre-production data. Multiple workspaces allow clean separation of environments where only tested content moves forward, ensuring stable and predictable deployments. Deployment pipelines work only with multiple workspaces, enabling incremental deployment, version comparison, and selective promotion of assets. Access control is stronger in multi-workspace setups because different roles, dev or test or prod users, are assigned to different environments. 14th question. How do you enforce workspace access policies using security groups? Azure AD security groups allow consistent access management by assigning groups, rather than individuals, to Power BI workspace roles. Access updates become easier because adding or removing a user from a security group automatically updates access across all related workspaces. Role-based access policies, admin, member, contributor, viewer, can be enforced uniformly across environments by mapping them to predefined security groups. This approach centralizes governance and reduces manual errors, ensuring compliance, auditability, and easier scaling for large organizations. 15th question. How do sensitivity labels propagate across datasets, reports, Excel downloads, and shared links? Sensitivity labels automatically inherit downstream, meaning if a dataset is labeled confidential, all reports, dashboards, and semantic models built on top of it receive the same label. When users export data to Excel, PDF, or PowerPoint, the label travels with the exported file, ensuring the security classification remains intact outside Power BI. Any shared link, whether via share report, copy link, or embedding inside Teams, also carries the same DLP protection, enforcing restrictions like blocking print, download, or forwarding. The label enforcement is backed by Microsoft Purview, so the protection remains consistent across Office apps, email, and external storage. 16th question. What happens if two datasets with different sensitivity labels are combined into one report? Power BI automatically applies the highest sensitivity label to the combined report, ensuring stricter protection overrides weaker classifications. The Lineage view reflects both datasets, but the final report inherits only the most restrictive label, such as highly confidential. Users attempting to downgrade the label will be blocked unless they have specific purview permissions to modify classification. This behavior prevents accidental exposure when blending sensitive and non-sensitive data in composite models or direct query blends. 17th question. How do you enforce downstream restriction when a confidential, labeled dataset is used in a shared workspace? Sensitivity labels enforce automatic policy restrictions, such as preventing export, screenshot capture, or external sharing depending on tenant DLP rules. Reports built on confidential datasets retain the same label, ensuring that workspace editors cannot bypass classification even if they have edit access. Admins can configure purview policies so confidential data cannot be shared outside the organization, regardless of workspace permissions. When added to shared or community workspaces, Power BI shows warnings and blocks unsupported operations to avoid a breach. 18th question. Describe scenarios where sensitivity labels override sharing permissions. Even if a user has edit permissions on a workspace, a highly confidential label may block exports to Excel or CSV, overriding workspace-level privileges. A user might attempt to share a report link externally, but purview rules can completely disable external sharing, regardless of Power BI role. If a labeled dataset prohibits data leakage, users may be blocked from copying visuals or taking screenshots in Power BI service. Even embedding into Teams or SharePoint may be restricted if the label enforces strict internal-only access. 19th question. How do you track data movement from SQL to Power BI to Excel using Lineage View? Lineage View displays a complete end-to-end dependency chain, showing connections from SQL Server, then Dataflow, then Dataset, then Report, then Dashboard. You can identify whether exports or downstream artifacts are connected through Analyze in Excel, showing exactly where the data flows. Workspace admins can open the Lineage graph to inspect refresh paths, upstream dependencies, and downstream usage. Combined with activity logs, you can audit how frequently users access the data and whether they have exported the model into external files. 20th question. What limitations exist in data lineage when using Python or R scripts or custom connectors? Python and R scripts often appear as unknown data source, because Lineage cannot introspect script-level transformations or external file paths used. Custom connectors built using API or proprietary logic may not expose metadata, causing partial lineage or missing upstream nodes. If a script pulls data dynamically, web scraping, external files, Power BI cannot map lineage beyond the script boundary, weakening governance visibility. For non-native sources, refresh and dependency tracking in Lineage View may be limited or not automatically synchronized. 21st question. How do you audit sensitivity label violations in Power BI usage logs? Power BI activity logs include actions such as label changes, export attempts, external sharing attempts, and blocked operations, allowing admins to track violations. Microsoft 365 Compliance Center provides DLP alerts when users try to export or share data that violates sensitivity rules. Admins can run automated scripts through the Power BI Admin API to monitor label changes or unauthorized attempts. Purview's audit logs can also detect if users removed or downgraded labels, even if they later reapply them. 22nd question. How do you monitor and analyze dataset refresh failures using the admin portal? The admin portal provides access to refresh summary and refresh failure logs, where admins can review failure reasons such as credential issues, gateway errors, or capacity limits. Admins can use the activity log to track when refreshes started, failed, or were cancelled, which helps in identifying recurring patterns across datasets. The Capacity Metrics app gives deeper insights into refresh performance, including CPU consumption, memory pressure, and long-running queries. Alerts can be configured via Power BI alerts or external monitoring tools to notify admins immediately when a critical dataset refresh fails. 23rd question. How do you restrict external sharing while still enabling B2B collaboration? Tenant admins can disable public external sharing but allow Azure add B2B guest user access, enabling controlled collaboration. Sensitivity labels and double key encryption can be used to ensure only intended B2B users can access specific datasets or reports. Admins can configure conditional access policies to require MFA for partner users before accessing any Power BI resource. Sharing can be allowed only through secure Workspace roles, preventing accidental sharing to non-approved external domains. 24th question. What are the most critical tenant settings that directly impact governance and security? The export and sharing settings, export data, publish to web, sharing outside the tenant, determine how securely data can be accessed and distributed. Content creation settings, such as enabling or disabling custom visuals or using XMLA endpoints, control what users can build and connect to. Security settings, including Azure AD integration, sensitivity labels, and B2B access restrictions, ensure data remains compliant. Dataset and dataflow settings, such as certified datasets, influence how governed and reliable the BI ecosystem remains. 25th question. How do you manage capacity overload in a premium workspace using Metrics app? The Metrics app visualizes CPU and memory usage, helping admins identify which datasets or refreshes are consuming excessive resources. Admins can use the app to detect memory throttling events, which indicate that a capacity is overburdened and needs scaling or optimization. Teams can reschedule heavy refreshes to off-peak hours based on usage trends observed in the Metrics app. Slow-performing datasets can be optimized by enabling incremental refresh, query folding, or aggregations after studying the workload statistics. 26th question. How do audit logs help detect suspicious report sharing or data export activity? Audit logs capture events such as report sharing, dataset exports, data downloads, and analyze in Excel usage, which indicate how data is being accessed. They help detect unusual patterns, like large volume exports or multiple access attempts from unknown IP addresses. Logs can be integrated with SIEM tools like Microsoft Sentinel, enabling automated alerting for high-risk events. Admins can use audit trails to trace back the exact user, timestamp, and action when investigating data leakage incidents. 27th question. What is the impact of disabling publish to web at the tenant level? Disabling the feature prevents anyone from generating public embed codes, eliminating the risk of exposing confidential data on the open internet. Reports that are already published to the web become inaccessible immediately, protecting previously exposed data. Users are forced to share reports through secure methods such as Workspaces, apps, or secure embed instead of public links. It strengthens compliance, especially for organizations bound by regulatory requirements like GDPR or HIPAA. 28th question. How do you automate admin tasks such as license assignment and workspace cleanup using Admin APIs? Admin APIs allow automated license assignment scripts that add or remove Power BI Pro or Premium per user licenses based on user activity. Workspace cleanup can be automated by identifying inactive or orphaned workspaces and removing them through scripted API calls. APIs can also be used to monitor dataset refreshes, capacity usage, and refresh schedules, enabling proactive management. Organizations use PowerShell or Azure Automation to run these scripts on a schedule, reducing manual admin workload significantly. Thank you for watching this session. If you have any questions, you are welcome to contact ZoomInData through our website, email, or phone. We're always here to support your learning journey. See you in the next video.